I never expected it to happen like this. But there I was, frozen, unable to stop as she leaned in closer. Every inch of my body screamed for me to pull away, but I couldn't. It was too late. We crossed a line I never thought we would, and now there's no turning back. It all started as just another weekend. It was just another weekend. My parents were away, some last-minute trip they decided to take. They left me alone with Lena, my stepsister, in this massive house we shared. Most of the time, we barely crossed paths. Lena was quiet, reserved, and I preferred to stay in my own space. We got along, but there was always a polite distance between us, a boundary I never thought to push. So, when I heard the sound of Lena's voice in the living room that evening, I wasn't expecting much. She wasn't one for spontaneous plans. "You want to do something this weekend?" she asked, standing in the doorway with a bottle of wine and a bowl of chips. I looked up from my laptop, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean by something?" I asked, half skeptical. "I don't know. Cook together, watch a movie, just hang out," she said, the offer hanging in the air. She sounded almost hopeful. It threw me off. I never really thought of Lena as someone who would initiate plans, at least not with me. She was always in her own world, staying in her room or reading. For a second I thought about declining. I had work to catch up on, and I was fine spending the weekend in my own space, but the way she was looking at me, like she genuinely wanted company, made me hesitate. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to break the silence for once. "All right," I said, pushing my laptop aside. "Pizza it is, but you're making the dough." Lena's face lit up, like I'd given her some sort of permission. "Deal," she grinned, and I couldn't help but smile back. We moved to the kitchen, and the hours slipped by quickly. As I watched her work, there was something different about the way she was acting, like she was actually present, not lost in her own thoughts. There was an energy about her that I hadn't noticed before, and I found myself looking at her more than I should have. Her hands moved easily, pulling the dough into shape, and I realized I was watching her a little too closely. Her hair, long and messy from the afternoon, framed her face in a way I'd never really paid attention to. "Do you even know what you're doing?" I teased, watching her fumble with the pizza toppings. "I'm figuring it out," she said, shooting me a playful glance. I caught myself staring at the way her eyes sparkled when she smiled. She had a different energy now, one that made me feel something. Maybe it was just the wine, or the fact that we were finally spending time together. Either way, the air between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure how to process it. By the time we slid the pizzas into the oven, it was quiet in the kitchen, except for the occasional clink of glasses and the hum of the oven. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, though. It was easy. I was starting to enjoy the space we were in, even if I couldn't quite understand why. When we finally sat down to eat, I noticed something else. The distance between us was closing. It wasn't just the space in the room shrinking, but the way we were talking. We shared stories, jokes, things I hadn't heard before, and I found myself drawn to her in a way I didn't expect. There was this softness in her I hadn't seen, and it made me wonder how I'd missed it for so long. She smiled at me, the dim light from the kitchen flickering on her face. "This is actually fun," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, it is," I agreed, a little surprised by the honesty of my words. "Maybe we should do it more often." As we finished the last slice, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. It was subtle, but it was there. Maybe it was the way she laughed at something I said, or how she kept glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. "Ready for a movie?" she asked, her voice a little softer than usual, like she was waiting for me to answer. I nodded, suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting. The couch was big, but somehow we were almost shoulder to shoulder. I tried to ignore it, but I felt the electricity in the space between us. I grabbed the remote and we settled in for the movie, but I couldn't stop glancing over at her, noticing the way her fingers brushed the arm of the couch, the way she settled into the cushions. She seemed more relaxed than usual, but I couldn't help but notice how her presence filled the space. Halfway through the movie, she shifted slightly, leaning closer to me. Her leg brushed mine, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just the closeness of the couch, but the warmth of her leg against mine didn't feel like nothing. It felt like something. I quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the movie, but the tension in the room was undeniable. Lena was always so distant, so quiet around me, but now everything felt different. After the movie, she excused herself to go to bed. I sat there on the couch for a moment, processing everything. It was like something had clicked, and I wasn't sure if I liked it, or if I was even ready for it. As I lay in bed that night, the feeling wouldn't leave. The warmth of her touch, the way her eyes lingered a little too long. It was all there, and it was messing with my head. I tried to sleep, but the questions kept racing through my mind. What was that? Why do I feel like this? I knew it wasn't just the pizza or the wine. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure what to do about it. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange, like the quiet of the house had shifted somehow. It was still early, and I hadn't expected to see Lena up yet, but there she was in the kitchen, a mug of coffee in her hands, staring out the window like she was lost in thought. I wasn't sure what to make of it. She looked different. Not in an obvious way. She didn't change her clothes or put on some kind of mask, but there was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A sort of openness maybe, or something softer, like she was seeing the world through a different lens. "Morning," I mumbled as I walked in, not sure how to break the weird tension still hanging between us from last night. She turned, blinking at me a little, almost like she hadn't expected me to come in. "Hey," she said quietly. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah, fine," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was lying. My thoughts had been running wild the entire night, too restless to really get any decent sleep. But I wasn't about to admit that to her. She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "I thought we could go for a walk later," she said, surprising me with the suggestion. I raised an eyebrow. "A walk? You never suggested that before." Lena smiled, though it was small, almost self-conscious. "I figured it'd be nice, just you and me, outside, away from all the screens for once." I wasn't sure what was behind her sudden interest in connecting, but it wasn't like I had any better plans. I agreed, though I couldn't help feeling an undercurrent of something that wasn't quite friendly, but not exactly hostile either. We spent the rest of the morning together in a way that felt almost normal, but with an undertone of anticipation I didn't know how to shake. There were these glances exchanged over breakfast that lingered a bit too long, moments where our hands brushed, and each time it felt like something electric passed between us, too quick to understand but too real to ignore. By the time we actually went on that walk, the distance between us was narrowing in a way that was unnerving. It wasn't just the air between us, it was everything. The way she laughed at something I said, the way she walked just a little closer than usual, like she was trying to make space for herself in my life. I couldn't quite place it, but I knew something had changed, something I wasn't sure how to deal with. The closeness felt different from before, almost too comfortable, but in a way that made me feel exposed. "So, tell me," Lena said, as we walked side by side down the tree-lined street. "What's been going on in that head of yours?" She was looking at me, her face open, unguarded, and for the first time I didn't feel like she was the one hiding behind walls. I felt like I should answer, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say something casual when everything between us felt like it was anything but. I had to be careful, right? But my mind kept racing, and every time I thought I'd figured it out, another moment would come that made everything more complicated. "I don't know," I finally said, glancing at her. "It's just been a weird couple of days." "Yeah, I get it," she replied, her voice softer now. "Things have been off, haven't they?" She was talking about something more than just the weekend. There was something else behind her words, something deeper, something more personal. The way she looked at me then was intense, different, and I felt my pulse race, my stomach tightening as I realized she wasn't just talking about the weekend, she was talking about us, about what had shifted between us. The walk ended without us ever really having said anything. We both stayed quiet on the way back, but I felt like the air between us was charged, like a storm was coming, but neither of us had the words to name it. Later that night, we decided to watch another movie, but I could barely focus on it. Lena sat next to me on the couch, but it felt like we were both aware of the space between us, how close we were, but how far apart it felt. At one point, she leaned against the armrest, her face so close to mine that I could feel the warmth of her breath against my skin. I should have backed away. I should have said something, anything to break the tension, but I didn't. When the movie ended, she didn't move. Neither of us did. We were sitting there in the dark, the quiet thick with unspoken words. Lena's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "Ava, do you think things could ever be different between us?" Her words hit me like a sudden gust of wind. I turned to face her, unsure of what to say. The moments stretched out between us, and I could feel her waiting for me to answer. The question hung there, and it felt like everything I hadn't been able to voice before, was finally coming to the surface. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She leaned in closer now, and before I could stop myself, I kissed her. The moment it happened, everything clicked into place. It wasn't just the attraction, it was the desire to cross that line, to see what would happen if we didn't hold back. I never thought this would be just the beginning, but as she kissed me back, I knew there was no going back now. The kiss lingered longer than I'd intended. I'd wanted to pull away, to stop it before it went too far, but something inside me refused to let go. It was like a magnetic pull that I couldn't escape. Lena's lips were soft, hesitant at first, but then there was a shift. Her hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I felt every inch of her body press against mine, and every part of me screamed that this wasn't right. But another part of me, the part I couldn't ignore, was telling me to keep going. I'd always thought of Lena as just my stepsister, someone I shared a house with, nothing more. But now, with her hands in my hair and her breath hot against my mouth, the boundaries that had kept us separate for so long felt like they were crumbling. I pulled away first, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and something darker. "What the hell just happened?" I whispered, barely above a breath. Lena didn't answer at first. She just sat there, her eyes wide, her cheeks flushed. Her lips were slightly parted, like she was still tasting the kiss, unsure if it had been real or just some kind of dream. The room was too quiet, the weight of the silence pressing down on both of us. I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "It just happened." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. "We can't do this, Lena. We're family." She shifted, moving away slightly, but not enough to break the tension between us. "But we're not really family, are we?" she said softly, her voice carrying an edge of something I couldn't quite place. "We're just two people stuck under the same roof pretending things are normal." Her words hung in the air, and I felt my chest tighten. She was right, in a way. We weren't really family, not in the traditional sense, but that didn't make what was happening any less wrong. I stood up suddenly, pacing across the room, trying to shake the fog from my mind. "This isn't us, Lena. This isn't who we are." But even as I said the words, I knew they didn't sound convincing. Not to me, and probably not to her, either. She stood up too, walking toward me slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Ava, but now that it has, I don't think I can pretend like it's nothing. Can you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I could just walk away from this, the feeling of her hand on my skin, the heat between us that felt like it had been building for so long, but neither of us had the courage to acknowledge. I tried to focus, tried to make sense of it all, but as she stepped closer again, my resolve started to weaken. Her eyes were dark now, full of an intensity I didn't recognize. "Lena, stop," I said, my voice trembling, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my words. She didn't stop. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing my arm in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. She looked at me, searching my face like she was looking for some kind of answer. "Do you want me to stop?" she asked, her voice a low murmur. I couldn't bring myself to say the words, couldn't bring myself to push her away. Part of me wanted to, needed to, but another part of me, the part that had been buried deep inside me for so long, was begging to see where this could go. Lena's hand moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. The space between us vanished, and all I could feel was the warmth of her body, the way her chest pressed against mine. I wanted to push her away, but I didn't. "I've wanted this for a long time, Ava," she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. "But I didn't know if you felt the same." Those words, the way she said them, sent a thrill of fear and desire rushing through me all at once. I couldn't think straight, my pulse raced, and my hands trembled as they reached out to her, unsure of what I was doing, but not caring anymore. I kissed her again, and this time, it wasn't tentative or unsure. There was an urgency to it, a desperation that I couldn't control. It was like we were both starved for something neither of us could explain. The kiss deepened, and my hands found their way to her back, pulling her closer, feeling her body against mine in a way that sent waves of heat crashing over me. Her hand slid under my shirt, skin on skin, and I gasped at the sensation. Everything about this felt dangerous, but it felt right too. We were crossing a line neither of us had ever imagined, and yet I couldn't bring myself to stop. I shouldn't be doing this, I whispered against her lips, but the words felt hollow. Lena didn't answer. She just kissed me harder, her hands roaming, exploring. She didn't want me to stop, and part of me didn't want to either. The world outside the room faded away. There was nothing but her. The heat between us, the undeniable pull that had been building for so long. I didn't know how this would end. But I knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same again. The days that followed felt like a blur. The house, which had always felt too large for just the two of us, now felt small and suffocating. Every room was filled with the ghost of that kiss, that moment when everything shifted. We didn't talk about it. Not directly, but it was there hanging between us like a secret we were both too afraid to voice. Lena seemed different though. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and it left a knot in my stomach. I wasn't sure if it was because of what happened between us or if it was just the weight of our unspoken words, but I could feel the tension whenever we were in the same room. The space between us was thick with something I couldn't describe, something I didn't know how to handle. That night, we sat on the couch again, the same place where everything had started, but this time, there was no movie, no distractions, just the two of us, the silence stretching on. Lena was sitting beside me, but there was an uncomfortable distance between us. She was staring at her hands, her fingers absently tracing the hem of her sweater. I wanted to say something. Anything, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say? How could I even begin to explain the mess I was in? After a long moment, Lena shifted closer. Just a little at first, but it was enough. Enough to send my heart racing in a way I couldn't control. She looked up at me, her eyes dark and filled with something I couldn't place. "Ava," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about it, about us." My chest tightened at the words. I wanted to tell her that it was a mistake, that we shouldn't have crossed that line, but the truth was I couldn't lie. I had been thinking about it too. I had been thinking about her, about how good it felt to be close to her, to be touched by her in a way I never expected. "I've been thinking about it too," I confessed, my voice shaky. "But that doesn't make it right, Lena." Her eyes flickered with something, hurt, regret. I couldn't tell. She leaned in slightly, her breath warm on my face. "I know," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But it felt right, didn't it? In the moment, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel wrong. That was the problem. It didn't feel wrong at all. Every touch, every kiss, it felt like we were meant to be in that moment. But now that the moment was over, everything felt complicated. "I can't stop thinking about you either," I whispered, almost in disbelief at myself. "But this is messed up." She moved even closer, so close that I could feel the heat radiating from her body, feel her breath against my lips. My heart was pounding, my chest tight with the tension between us. "I don't want to stop," Lena said, her voice barely audible. "I don't want this to end." I didn't know what to do. Part of me knew this was wrong, that we were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But another part of me, the part that had been holding back, the part that wanted to be with her, wanted to feel more, was urging me to keep going, to not stop. Before I could say anything, she kissed me again. It was softer this time, almost like she was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, everything else faded away. There was no right or wrong, no consequences, just her and me in that moment. But as the kiss grew more heated, I knew we couldn't stay in that moment forever. And when we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, my mind racing. "What does this mean, Lena?" I asked, my voice low, full of uncertainty. "What are we doing?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned her forehead against mine, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I can't pretend like I don't want this anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of everything we hadn't said. But it felt like the beginning of something we couldn't turn back from, no matter how much we might want to. The weekend was over before I knew it. My parents came home, their return bringing with it a sense of normalcy that felt almost surreal. The house was back to being just a house, the quiet routine of everyday life settling back into place. But nothing felt normal. Not anymore. Lena and I barely spoke in the days that followed. It was as if the space between us had grown impossibly wide, and we were both too afraid to cross it. We avoided eye contact, spoke only when absolutely necessary, and pretended like the weight of what had happened didn't hang in the air like a thick fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something inside of me, something inside of her. It was like we were both carrying the same secret, but neither of us knew how to address it. Every time our paths crossed, there was this silent understanding, a kind of quiet tension that neither of us could escape. I found myself replaying everything over and over again in my head. The kiss, the touch, the way Lena had looked at me when she said she didn't want it to stop. It all felt like a dream, but the reality of it was too vivid to ignore. Lena didn't bring it up again, not once. She acted as if it had never happened, and part of me wanted to do the same. But another part, the part that still felt her warmth against my skin, still remembered the way she kissed me, couldn't. That night, I found myself standing outside her door, hesitating. I hadn't meant to come here. I hadn't meant to say anything, but I couldn't let it go. When I knocked, I heard her soft voice from inside. "Yeah?" I opened the door before I could second-guess myself. "Lena, we need to talk." She was sitting on her bed, her eyes tired but curious. She looked at me like she knew what was coming, but she didn't say anything. She just watched me, waiting. "I don't know what we're doing," I began, my voice shaking a little. "I don't know how to deal with this, with us." Lena stayed silent for a moment, her gaze never leaving mine. "I know," she said softly. "I don't either." I took a deep breath sitting on the edge of her bed. I can't stop thinking about it, about what happened, but I don't know if we're supposed to be doing this. We're family, Lena. This isn't something we can just pretend didn't happen. She was quiet, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes flickered with something, hurt, regret, or maybe something else, but she didn't look away. "I know," she whispered again. "I keep thinking about it too, but I don't want to stop thinking about it. And I don't think I want it to end. I don't want you to go back to being just my stepsister. I don't know what this is, but I don't want to pretend it's nothing." Her words hit me like a wave, washing over me with a rush of emotions I didn't know how to process. I could feel the pull, the desire to be close to her again, to let things unfold however they were supposed to. But there was also a part of me that knew this was dangerous. This wasn't something we could just walk away from once we had crossed that line. "I don't know how to handle this," I admitted, feeling the weight of my words. "I don't know what this means for us, for our relationship." Lena reached out then, her fingers brushing mine. "Maybe we don't need to know yet," she said quietly. "Maybe we just need to let things be, let ourselves figure it out. Whatever happens, we can't pretend we didn't feel something." I closed my eyes, taking a slow, shaky breath. Everything inside me was telling me to pull away, to protect myself from whatever this was becoming. But there was a part of me, so deep inside, that didn't want to let go. I didn't want to lose what we had shared, even if I didn't know where it was going. "I'm scared," I whispered, finally allowing the fear to surface. "I'm scared that we can't go back." Lena squeezed my hand, her touch gentle. "I'm scared too, but maybe we're not supposed to go back. Maybe we're supposed to move forward. I don't know what this is, Ava, but I'm not ready to let it end." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The vulnerability in her eyes, the way her lips quivered with unspoken words. I wasn't ready to let it end either, but I couldn't ignore the reality of what we'd done. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, the silence between us filled with everything we couldn't say. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if we could figure this out, if we could ever go back to how things were before. But as I looked at Lena, sitting beside me in the dim light of her room, I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed, and no matter what came next, I didn't think I'd ever forget her. What have we done? It wasn't supposed to happen, but now it's too late. The lines between us have blurred in ways I never imagined, and I don't know if I can untangle the mess we've created. I've crossed a line I can never uncross, and yet I can't stop thinking about her. What are we now? Just a fleeting moment, or something deeper, something that can't be erased? I can't make sense of it, and maybe I'm not supposed to, but I need to know. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.